I'm standing beside.
I'm Joel Eschler, I'm producer at 2K Australia.
And
James Lopez, producer at Gearbox.
Warning, no atmosphere detected.
Borderlands is a shooter and an RPG. It's a game all about exploration. It's about building yourself up, making yourself better, and it's got an awesome story. It's about exploring this planet called Pandora. We're actually going to the moon in Borderlands The Pre-Sequel. We're going to the Hyperion space station as well. It's going to be fun.
So I really started a little over a year ago. We were making DLC for Borderlands 2, and we knew that there's going to be an expectation at some point to go to the moon. And it's something that we were always getting comments on whenever in the forums going, when are we going to go to the moon? When are we going to go to the space station? And we happened to run into 2K Australia at GDC last year. And they had just wrapped up on BioShock Infinite. And so we're like, hey, let's do something. And that's really where all of this started. We had an idea of a story that we wanted to tell about who Jack was before he rose to power. And that's where this takes place.
Anthony Birch, the writer for Borderlands 2, he's writing this game as well as with two English writers who are working in 2K Australia, Marie Suckling and Marek Walton. So this is actually really interesting because in this game we're getting the typical Borderlands humor that everyone really loves, but we're also kind of throwing in some English and Australian humor in there. People are really going to feel that the places on the moon and the space station and the other areas you explore in Borderlands The Sequel are completely different to what they played in Borderlands 2.
It's definitely important to have people that have written Borderlands before on hand. We want to try to share the writing workload with 2K Australia's writers, but we definitely wanted Anthony around to kind of guide them through the thought process, give creative feedback. It's definitely a collaborative effort where we wanted him to be involved, but also give somebody else a chance at it. But definitely needed him to be around.
Well, some of the things that we've brought to Borderlands The Pre-Sequel, the low gravity. The low gravity completely changes up, as you guys just saw in the demo. We also brought in the cryo weapons, which allow you to freeze and shatter enemies, and the oxygen system. So you are out on the atmosphere, well, you're on the moon, there is no atmosphere, so you have a new piece of gear called the Oz Kit, which allows you to breathe. This Oz Kit also allows you to use oxygen to boost, so it's almost like a double jump, a jetpack, and it allows you to slam down the ground. So my favorite thing is really combining all three of these. So I like to jump up, drift over guys, freeze them with the cryo weapon, and then butt stomp down on them and shatter them into a million pieces. It's so satisfying every time.
Gearbox kind of does this fun thing with words to begin with. We create things like badassitude and RPS. So this really kind of felt like in the same vein. It's definitely the kind of flavor that we knew that our fans would appreciate and latch on to.
Well, I've actually been over to Gearbox many times. James has been over to Canberra many times. We're actually exchanging people constantly. We have a couple of our guys over in Dallas at the moment. We have a designer from Gearbox, Drew Mobley, over in Australia. He's actually having a fun weekend in Melbourne with our QA lead at the moment. But yeah, we're constantly talking. We have video conference, we have Messenger. It's been really a good organic relationship. 2K Australia has a long history of working with other developers. We worked on the entire BioShock series with Irrational Games and 2K Marin, and working with Gearbox has just continued that success. These guys are great to work with.
I'm really proud that we've made the cryo element work. It was something where 2K Australia had this idea for doing the ice, and we'd been really resistant to it because we'd had concerns about it not working out. And then they prototyped it out, and it worked really well. And it was really awesome to be part of something with a team that could run with this idea and just really make it awesome. And I mean, it's so satisfying when you freeze an enemy and then you shatter them, and you can just walk through them as it's breaking down. It just feels so rad.
So I will say I'm really proud of being part of bringing Claptrap as a playable character, but because we're not talking about him just yet, I'm going to tell you the oxygen. I love the oxygen system. So it's not just a resource that the player has to monitor. There's plenty of oxygen around. Every time you kill an enemy, you can loot oxygen. You have oxygen generators, oxygen wells. Really, it's about giving the player options. If you come into an environment and you have an oxygen generator, you have a choice. If you have a really good fire weapon, you can turn on that oxygen, lure them in there and set them on fire. Or you can choose to turn the oxygen off, and then they have to develop their own oxygen bubble, which you can burst, and they'll start leaking oxygen, be vulnerable. And one really cool thing as well, if you have a shock weapon, you're set on fire in an oxygen. Because you have a shock weapon, you can shoot at an oxygen generator, that will turn it off, and you'll stop burning. So anytime we can add something to a game which allows players to have different stories about how they engage with the game, I'm always proud of that.